of that $1 book compared to that $60,000 a year, university times 4. Oh my goodness. Hello and welcome back to the Fire Ready Aim podcast. I am Jonathan Cowan and this is my wife, Brianna Cowan.
Yeah.
And we took a little layoff. It's been a few weeks since we recorded a podcast, but we're back in the studio, back in the office studio, making it happen.
Yeah.
It's amazing how busy life can get, but
But we're out here.
Yeah, and I was inspired the other day by a TikTok you showed me. It was about how many people, like the percentage of podcasts that make it to a certain amount of episodes. And what was that number again? Was that 10?
It was 20 podcasts.
Okay.
Puts you in the top 1% of podcasting because most people don't get to 20. So we're going to get to 20 at least.
Gosh,
and you know
darn
who
it,
said
we're gonna
that?
get there.
You know who said that? That was Alex Hermosi. I love him and his wife Layla. I listen to their podcasts and watch all of their content. And today when I was listening to his podcast, I don't know if it's his most recent one, but I looked down. It was episode 783. I was like, damn, that's impressive. But yeah,
it's a lot of podcasting.
So we've got a while to catch up to him. But
yeah, well,
yeah. Hey,
something to shoot for, right?
Something to shoot for. What are we talking about today, Jonathan?
So today, the topic is 6 mind-bending business books you need to read right now.
Right now.
Like literally, stop listening to this podcast and read. No, actually, I guess you have to listen to us say what books they are first.
That's true.
So,
Yep.
So yeah, what makes a good book to you, Brianna?
At least for business books, my qualifiers are if it's something that, just if there's something in there that shifts my paradigm, like if there is some, a way I have been thinking and it kind of shifts that. And I find my favorite books are the ones that I've highlighted a bunch and I reference them.
Yeah.
And a lot of these I reference. So yeah, I would say those are probably my 2 qualifiers for a business book at least.
Have you always been a reader or?
Yes, I feel like I stopped in high school. We've kind of talked about this.
The educational system beat the love of reading out of you?
Beat the love of reading out of me, absolutely. I remember it was Machiavelli, and I was like, I will not. And honestly, I should have, because that probably would have been one that I was interested in. But I was really good at Cliff Notes and using the people around me that had read it to just give me a quick summary. And I'm great at context clues. So honestly, when we would talk about it in class, I could pick up where somebody left off, no problem. And it seemed like I was participating and I knew what I was talking about. But
so one thing I'm interested about is the love of reading. Does that start from your parents, or was that just kind of an internal thing, or did they push you to it, or?
For me?
Yeah, for you personally.
I don't know, honestly. I feel like I just have a natural tendency to be a nerd, so that helps. When you're not hanging out with a bunch of friends in middle school, you're freaking reading. So I don't know, really. I have heard that there's studies about it actually doesn't matter, if the parents read or whatever, but it's access to books in the home. Kids who tend to read more, it's just that there's more books in the house.
Interesting.
Which is weird. It actually doesn't matter if the parents read to them or if, I'm sure that helps, or if, the parents themselves read a lot, but it's more just the kind of access to books. And usually I'd say there's a correlation between having a lot of books in your house and your parents probably read. So what about you?
And you had a lot of books in the house, you're saying?
I don't actually remember that. No.
That's interesting because we started dating when we were juniors in high school,
yeah.
And I don't really remember tons of books being around.
No, I don't really know. I don't know. But your mom, such an avid reader.
Oh yeah, there's not a room in my mom's house that doesn't have 1,000 books. It seems like
Seriously.
she's a library. If she put them all in one level of the house, it'd look like a library.
And she's a speed reader, which is fascinating.
Yeah.
Because I heard for speed readers, you actually have to turn off the voice that reads in your head because it doesn't read at the pace. How you read out loud is slower, and then how you kind of read with the voice in your head is a little bit faster, but still slow. Speed readers turn that off. I'm like, how? I don't know. That's
impressive.
Impressive.
The funny thing is, I brought it personal like this just so I could bring up the fact that my mom loves to read like these weird like Amish romance novels. It's like, how the heck?
Poor Cheryl.
How is that even a thing? You know?
It's like, it's kind of like a delicate romance book. Like there's some
So it's
rough
like-
romance books out there. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like
So
one shade of gray, you
Yes,
know, not the
one
50.
shade,
So,
one shade of gray. I
so
swear to God, if that isn't already an Amish novel, it should be.
well,
You
anyway.
touched my toe.
So,
Anyway.
so yeah. Well, honestly, that was it for me too. I'm actually, we've talked too much where I forgot what you said for that answer. What makes a good book to you? But to me, it was something that I can take, like I can think of I could sum up that book pretty quickly. And I looked it through my list of things. I was like, oh shoot, that one, it has like a motto or like a theme that's very easy to pinpoint. Mm-hmm. So, let's just start with what is your number one book that is,
okay, for real though, I didn't put these in order of like number one, number two. I just chose 3 in no particular order, and there probably is a favorite, but it is not in that order. So the first one, I had to change because John stole one of mine, but this one is called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living. It is an old book. It's by Dale Carnegie. I found it at a thrift store. This is like my favorite thing to do. Go to a thrift store, and people who read these books, sometimes they like pick them up and put them down, or they highlight them and they have notes, and that's really fun. But an old book, and I worry about things, so I picked it up. And it was fascinating because I actually pulled out 4 questions, which I will tell everyone what they are, and made a little worksheet for myself. Stupidly simple about how to get worries out of your head and stop worrying about them. So in one part of the book, he says there's 4 questions you need to ask. And I felt like worry is this hidden thing that happens in your brain. You're chronically like overthinking something. I'm worried about it, but you don't really expose it to like the light of day. So it's always just sitting in your head and you're ruminating over it. And this really gets it out and kind of exposes it for what it is and shows you like it's not as big and hairy and scary as it was in your head. So the first question is, what am I worrying about? Super simple, but seriously, what are you worrying about? Like, what do you keep, going over in your head? What is the kind of potential outcome that's so horrible that you're thinking about? And then, what can I do about it? It's so practical, but it's like, okay, is there something I can do about it? Am I worrying about, for non-business things, am I worrying about some political thing that I can't, move the needle on? Maybe stop there because you're like, I can't freaking do anything about it. That's why I need to stop worrying about it. But usually your worry, there is something practical you can do about it. And it's usually just the first step you haven't taken that makes it feel so like overbearing. And then the next question is, or what can I do about it? And then you decide, what am I going to do about it? So you kind of have a brain dump of like, what are all the things I can do? Distill it down into what am I going to do for sure? And then you inject some practicality in asking, when am I going to start doing it? So it's extremely simple, and I couldn't believe how like simple it was. I'm like, this is stupid. But when I actually went through the exercise for a few things, or when I find myself like, really, there's something that's just nagging at me constantly, I literally made myself a worksheet that I will answer these questions.
I think you should print a few out and just have them sitting around the office because, like, man, I know I've seen you use that, but I didn't remember that it was from that book.
Yeah, I stole it from that. So I feel like it's a good practical way of like exposing kind of your own bad habits of thinking, because worry is just, first of all, if it happens, now you have stressed out about it 2 times, before it happened and when it happened.
Yep.
And sometimes you're stressing out and it's never going to happen. Or there's something, if a train is coming at you and you quickly go through these things, what can I do about it? What am I going to do about it? I'm going to jump out of the way. Then you have solved it before the train hits you. So, yeah, I love that book. I love that I found it for like $1 at the thrift store, little hidden gem. And I love that it's a practical way of exposing worry. Because I feel like now more than ever, people are in their head, overthinking things, worried about things. So
It's a lot cheaper than a therapist. $1, baby.
Exactly.
Honestly, and that's
Thank
the big
you, Dale.
thing. Yeah.
Carnegie.
If you think about it, like, that's what I've always said to a lot of people who've worked for us, is like, you can read somebody's life work for usually $20.
Or $1.
Or $1 in
That's
that case,
insane.
which is just insane. I was just doing I volunteered at a kids camp with my son Kingsley, and it was at Olivet Nazarene University. And I was shocked to find out from somebody who goes to that school that it is $60,000 per year. It's
That's
like,
insane.
oh my goodness, what's the ROI? You know, what's the return on investment on that of that $1 book compared to that $60,000 a year, university times 4? Oh my goodness, So it's like,
Well, and the access you get to some of these, like, the most brilliant minds of our time. There are people who are, CEOs of billion-dollar companies. It's like, you'd never get that amount of time with that person for $20. It just wouldn't freaking happen.
Yeah. And these
these are people who could, charge you $1 million to sit down and talk to your employees for an hour.
and people are like, oh, these people probably gatekeep their secrets. Well, guess what? When they're putting a book out, they want their best stuff out there so they look good.
Exactly.
They have the ego. They're like, this needs to be a game-changing book.
Exactly.
So they're going to put their best things they know and how they've gone about their life in that book. So,
Well, what's the first book on your list? Not number one, but...
yeah, the first one I put down was The One Thing. The one book you put down as your first.
Yep.
And you took off your list.
Ripped it straight from me,
Yeah.
but...
Thank you. But that was a big deal for us a long time ago when we were...
And that's by Gary Keller.
Gary Keller and
Jay Papasan.
Jay Papasan. I just remember being at our first restaurant location. It was in Orland Park, Illinois, and basically, we were just trying to figure out life, and I think that's when we started really reading business books at that time. It was probably like 2011 or 12, I would guess, and we read that book. I hope that book didn't come out in like 2014. That'd feel stupid. But anyways.
No, I remember reading it and being like, it's been out for this long. Like,
Okay.
I think it came out before that even.
All I know is that was a game changer, and it was really cool hearing that Gary Keller built Keller Williams off that mentality of what is the one thing that makes everything else easier or unnecessary. And I think that kind of boils down a lot, when you're stuck in anxiety of like, oh, what do I do next? It kind of goes hand in hand with that book.
That's true.
That you're talking about right there. It's, well, what is that one thing I can do? And then when you're done with that, then you've earned the right to move on to something else. So,
and they call it the focusing question,
Yes.
which makes the most sense because you're kind of like pinpointing exactly what is the next thing you can focus on. We are all so distracted, and we live in a culture of like, you feel productive if you've answered all your Slack messages and responded to your emails, but that is such like low level work for most people. There are some people that's your job, that might be your priority, but there are a lot of makers out there where it's like you need time. If you're a video editor, you need time to like sit down, focus, do that one thing. You can't be interrupted. You get interrupted, it takes 15 to 20 minutes to get back into that thing. So if you're interrupted every hour, you just are losing 15 minutes of every hour. And yeah, I love that book and the question. And I think it applies across the board. Business, life. I love it.
absolutely.
And we've gone through their goal setting retreat, which is really cool.
Funnel.
Yeah, I know. It's a book that's also a funnel, but it is a good just guiding principle. And we have used the idea of the one thing to time block our days. We're going to do our most important work for the first, 3-4 hours of the day, hopefully. But the idea is that you kind of protect that, and then you can really get your most important thing done.
Absolutely.
Which at the end of your month, you're going to look back and be like, what did I accomplish? You're going to point to those things, not to the emails you answered or the phone call you picked up because there was an emergency.
Yeah, well, it's living in the important and not urgent quadrant of life.
Yep.
And that's where real change happens, so.
Yep, totally.
Good stuff. Well, on to, not in any particular order, your second book that you're going to state.
We don't have to say that anymore,
All
I think. But Who Not How. This is by Dan Sullivan and Dr. Benjamin Hardy. I freaking love a book title that is literally the concept in the title. You don't have to go much further than Who Not How to kind of understand the concept, but I suggest you do read it. This one kind of blew my mind when I first read it. Now I feel like it is ingrained in my way of thinking. I tried to practice and live like this, but before I read it, not the case. And the idea of the book is, instead of asking, how can I do this? Because that just narrows it down to your own expertise, your own intelligence, your own energy, which isn't always like, top level or suited for that problem. You refine that question into who can help me with this. And a lot of that time, that answer kind of leads to it's a better question. And you're going to get a better answer because you're asking, who can help me instead of how can I do this? There's so many times like in business where, when you first start, you're wearing a lot of hats, but it is a lot of things you know how to do. As you expand, you actually do have to start relying on the expertise of other people.
Absolutely.
And if you don't think like that, if you try to be the best at everything, you're going to burn yourself the hell out. And
not sustainable.
It's not sustainable. And it's just, you then become the ceiling for your business because you can only be an expert at one, maybe two things,
You're also keeping people out of the game. Like they don't even have the opportunity to do. It could be a special opening for somebody else and a blessing to their life. And just because you're trying to do everything yourself, they never even get that opportunity.
Mm-hmm. And I would say it wasn't from this book, but it kind of goes right alongside it, is entrepreneurs tend to think no one's going to do it as good as me. Mm. And the question somebody asked me back one time was, but what if they do it better? Mm. And I was like, there is a strong possibility that exists. And now I've seen over and over, there's lots of people who would do, X, Y, Z, their craft better than me. So it's easier now that I'm on the other side of it and I've seen it work so many times. I'm like, that's a guiding principle. I don't need to think about it anymore. That's how I'm going to live. But you can get stuck as a beginning entrepreneur thinking, everything has to be, how do I do it? I'll look into it. I'll Google it. I'll push through. No.
Yeah.
Can't do it. So that's mine. What is your...
I feel like I'm like frat bro or something saying like, I'm in business school. And Rich Dad Poor Dad. Like I read one book in my life, and but I would have to say reading Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki was definitely a mindset shift, and it's why we bought our first commercial building in Lamont, was because of just that mindset shift mentality. I didn't even know it was an option. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you need to read books to open up your mind to the possibilities of what you can do out there in the world. Mm-hmm. As growing up, I just looked at all these other, where businesses were, and I was like, Mr. Businessman owns those. Like, I don't know anybody who does that, you know? So it's like cool just hearing, oh, you can do this, and how rent works, and how, equity and ownership works and stuff like that. And, just that mindset shift. I guess I'm speaking about it right now as if everybody knows that book,
Well, the whole point is to get them to read it.
Yeah, you're right. So if you haven't read it, it's an interesting read.
Yes. Yes. And kind of one of those like fundamental, it's on a lot of people's lips and a lot of people's lists as classics. And you can kind of argue, there are definitely arguments for, he didn't get rich from the principles in that book. He got rich because of the book.
Because of the book.
We've heard that argument, and that may be true. But there are a few, if you read kind of the same, you see a few of the same kind of patterns across books. I feel like those are just guiding principles. And if there's a, classicism to them, where they're going to, that's just a throughout time sort of a principle.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. What's your next one, babe?
This one I truly love. I highlighted so many pages in this book, and I keep it in my purse. I use it every week. This one is The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham. This one does not give you really any clue as to what it is. And when I read the title, I was like, I don't know. But it was recommended by so many people that I finally read it. And this one is all about sitting down and giving yourself the time and space to actually think. And you will not believe how rare, if you think right now, and then you read this book and you actually do the exercise of thinking time, which is what he talks about, you will find that you do not think. Most of the day, you are just moving through the day, progressing through the day, and you don't. You really actually have to, call out time and space for you to think deeply about some of your biggest problems and opportunities. And the whole book is just littered with good questions to ask yourself in any situation. Things that a CEO, the things that you should never delegate, and kind of like thinking about where do you stand in those areas. Things with opportunities and risk that I never would have thought about. I think, I don't know if it was Peter Drucker he referenced in the book, but he said having a good answer, is a good thing, but having a good question is brilliant. And I totally believe that. So I actually spend almost as much time formulating a good question to ask myself as I do answering it, because there isn't like this brilliance in my brain that's just going to come out. You really need to like pose a good question to yourself. There's an example early in the book where he's talking about, profits. You're trying to think about, so traditionally you might sit down, pen and paper, and go, why are my profits low? That's just a shitty question to ask yourself. You're not going to find any revealing answers. Are you busy?
I'm looking for something right now to add to this conversation.
No. Got it. Instead, the question could be something more like, what would have to be true for my business to generate $1 million in profit? It just gives you a different question to think about, and it will give you different answers. So it's awesome. I reference it all the time. I've highlighted the questions, and
we literally used it the other day in a meeting.
Yep.
And that's a helpful tool. Another one you should leave, maybe laminate and put in the office somewhere.
Yeah. Well, the whole book, I could laminate literally the whole book, because every chapter he talks about kind of a different scenario in business, and then the questions he would ask or pose to himself to sit down and think about it. I also love the concept. He tells you how to strategically do thinking time, and he says, to have a thinking chair and have kind of this ritual and have a blank pen and paper. My favorite thing that he mentions about it is, let's say you're making just lists, to always have another bullet point. So you've thought 3 things, you put a 4th one, just because your brain will make the connection that there might be another idea.
Interesting.
To write down. And so to always kind of leave space for that. So the guy's brilliant. Freaking love that book. And yeah, cannot. And again, the $20 concept, like the fact that you could get all of that for $20 is...
It's a game changer.
Insane.
Yeah.
Insane.
Absolutely. Well, the last book on our list, my last book, is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I just feel like that book was just, it was so good we had our whole company read it. And it's amazing the little things you do that achieve huge results. I definitely think that's one that everybody should read. And it's, as we're going through this list, I kind of laughing, is that I've read my books and you've read my books too. You read every single book on this list, and I've only read my books. So I'm like, dang, I need to pull it together over here. And after hearing...
Conceptually, I just like distill the information to you. So really you're delegating to me.
Yeah.
Look at you, being so high level.
Yeah, yes. But what did you like about that book? Because I know that you're...
I loved... I mean, atomic, super small. So that's the concept, is you start small. You know, sometimes we get these grandiose ideas, especially around like a new school year or the actual new year, that, new year, new me. No, bitch, you're the same person. Like, you're not going to change overnight. And so I think the idea of starting really small was cool. The guy who just put his gym shoes on in the morning and, would mark that as a win for the day, as he was trying to kind of build the identity of, I'm the type of person that works out in the morning.
Yeah.
And then it was that he drove to the gym and hauled his ass just right back home. It was the concept of like, I am making a step up. I'm not going to throw myself in, because if I, the first 2 weeks of the year, all of a sudden I'm working out 5 days, that's not sustainable. It's not going to happen. You're trying to like re-identify yourself as somebody who's, goes to the gym or spends a bunch of time with their family or whatever. And it's so much more easier to start when it's a bite-sized thing to initiate on.
Absolutely. I loved in that book that he even took it to his family life with his children, or I believe it was his daughter's like soccer team or something like that. And they just put in, little things that the team could do. They said if this were to happen, by the end of the year, we could win the championship. And they ended up going from last place to first place. Mm-hmm. And it's like, it's just a great book for not just business, for anybody's life.
Yeah.
And
a
to
lot
grow.
of these have so much crossover with just life. I wouldn't say necessarily Atomic Habits is a business book. Even like The One Thing isn't necessarily a business book, but so much of like what entrepreneurs are and how they will scale their business, like they are the ceiling. So if you're not developing yourself and your team isn't developing, you probably hit a ceiling you're not going to move on from.
Absolutely.
So that's why these are so, they cross over self-development and business, but you are self-developing to grow your business. So
what are you reading right now?
Another thrift store book. Actually, I went in and I was like, I pulled out a bunch of books, and it was like it was all about time. I realized when I purchased them, I was like, oh, I must be having like a crisis right now with time. But I just started it. It's like an older book, again, but I feel like there's wisdom in older books. Take Back Your Time. I don't remember who wrote it. It's a woman with beautiful 80s hair on the cover. But, I think sometimes you do need to like refocus, reprioritize your time when you're feeling strained. As you keep moving in business, there are new things that are pulling at you. So
I looked for Take Back Your Time, and all I found was a book from 2021. So I didn't find the right one.
No. Yeah, I'm sorry. Maybe I'll...
Well, the interesting thing is when you go to those thrift stores, you're finding books that probably might not be in bookstores anymore sometimes.
I know. And I just love thrifting in general, so it's kind of like the thrill of the hunt. You never know what you're going to find. But there's some great books. So anybody who argues that like, oh, I couldn't possibly, pick up a reading habit and read all of these books. Okay, I have now bought 2 of these great books, multiple books, for $1. And there are libraries. So, no, you can absolutely do this.
Have you found any hilarious notes with your secondhand purchases?
I actually have. One, I don't remember what book it was. And I don't know how this guy got through the book. He was arguing with the author, in the margins. He's like, this is a stupid idea, on the side. And I was like, this book is not even that great, but I'm going to keep flipping through to find these notes because it was hilarious. He would underline points and basically he was just refuting all of them. I was like, why did you read this book? Were you debating this guy on the stage and this was preparation for it? I have no idea. It was hilarious though.
Wow, what if that truly was happening? That'd be interesting.
I don't know, maybe, but I was like, and then he just gave it away. I'm like, ooh.
I think I'm totally making this up, but I thought you said once it was a book about follow through, and then the person their notes stopped halfway through or something like that.
1,000%. Oh my God, what book was that? But it was like a quarter of the way through, their highlights and notes stopped, and I was like, that's your downfall, bro. You couldn't finish a book on follow through. The irony is too rich. But yeah.
So, a book I'm reading right now, it was brought to us by our friend Tom Roos, and he's challenged us to read the Oz Principle. He kind of heard, one of our, we every year we go on an annual trip as a company, and we, with our EOS process, and we have an implementer, Dan, on site with us, and he helps us look through things, and we took a organizational strength challenge, and we saw that our biggest weakness as an organization is accountability. So it's kind of like perfect timing. Just this week, actually, Tom was like, "You need to read this." He actually sent over like a presentation that he put together for his company. He's at Cooper's Hawk, and it was just kind of cool. Like, wow, sometimes books can appear right at the right time when you need to read it.
Well,
So
books are teachers.
Yes.
It's like when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Yeah. I'm kind of laughing that we didn't find the proper accountability book sooner, considering we found it as our organizational weakness.
Yeah, that's true. But I do think like it was interesting talking to Tom about there is kind of like an ick around the word accountability that that I'm going to hold you accountable. Like it just sounds so disgusting. And kind of like demeaning, especially when you're talking about like adults who are like grown and good at their craft. It's weird to think about things like that. And he was just talking about people are accountable or they're not. There isn't a level of like, I will hold you accountable. I don't remember where this is from, different book, but it was talking about accountability. I think it was actually a hiring book, either Top Grading or Hiring for Attitude. And it was talking about, like, Tom Brady as an employee. If he misses a pass, like, he doesn't need the coach to tell him, like, okay, you missed that pass. We really need to work on that. I'm going to hold you accountable. He is an accountable person. He knows, he feels it. He doesn't like it. He does things to fix it. And I think that's a much healthier definition of accountability. Instead of, like, I'm going to stuff something down your throat and make you do it. I can't make you do that. You're either accountable to your own results or you're not.
No, that's huge right there.
Yeah.
You just saying that made me think of like how many things in our business have we taken a weakness and made it a strength because of a book.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. Just thinking about hiring. Like we had no idea. At one point we couldn't hire anybody who was high level. So there's no money to pay them anything. But since, we saw weakness in higher level hiring as a company at one point, and then you read what books?
Those two, really, Top Grading, and Who, which is kind of like a distillation of Top Grading, and then Hiring for Attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of turned that weakness into like something I can go around, when I talk to people and like, oh, how do you find this or that? It's like, well, literally from books. You wrote out a whole system, So it's good job, babe.
Thanks, babe.
Proud of you.
Thank you.
So.
Well, that's it.
Yeah. Well, those are the books.
Yeah.
And, just happy to be back in the recording studio with you, Bree, making it happen.
Yes.
We're not falling off the wagon,
Feels good.
and
we're going to get to 20.
Absolutely. Why not? This is fun.
This is fun.
It's fun talking about this stuff. So, but thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will be back next week with another episode for you. So have a great day.